morning, everybody. Welcome back to Crafting and Crime Daily. It's Friday. I've already put away all of my stuff that was here because I'm getting ready to get out the cross stitch and the crochet because that's what I do on the weekends. Yep. Anyway, covering the trial of Scot Peterson. And I hate to say that I'm feeling one kind of way over the other, but I am leaning heavily in one direction. I'll let you guys figure out what direction that is. But first, what do we do on Fridays? This is where I lose my audience. If you don't like dancing, just wait 15 seconds. It'll be over. Okay? Everybody out of your chair. Ready? I got a cute outfit on today, camouflage so nobody can see my fat. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Ooh, 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 ooh. The duck walked up to the lemonade stand. He said to the man, run in the stand. Okay, that just got me a copyright claim. Okay. That is the duck song, and I absolutely love it. You want to see what I get done on the painting? All right, let me take my notes, put them over here. I will show you. My goal is to have this done before I go to the retreat at the end of the month. Because I don't want to take it, but look. Isn't it gorgeous? So you see what I have left? Yeah, roughly half left. So I actually think when I resume, I'm going to finish these two sections here, and then I'm going to go around to the other side. Because over here, there's a bunny and butterflies and some animals going on that I would like to bling. Yeah, maybe not the animals, but the butterflies, of course. Okay, so we'll just leave that for now. There we go. I hope you guys have some nice plans for this weekend. Me, not so much. Crocheting and cross stitching. I'm going to work on the next, the June gnome for the gnome blanket that I'm crocheting. And I don't know what cross stitch. I haven't decided which cross stitch I want to work on. Maybe the Christmas tree again. I don't know. We'll see. So let's talk about day 2 of the Scot S-C-O-T Peterson trial. Not the Scot Peterson, not to be confused with the other Scot Peterson, the Lacey Peterson, that guy. Brian Stabley was the first person on the stand for day 2. Now, let me bring you up to speed. This is, if you missed day 1 or my preview, this Scot Peterson was the student or the school resource officer assigned by the Broward Sheriff's Office. He was a Broward County Sheriff deputy, fully sworn police officer, carried a weapon. He was assigned to Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, and he had been there for several years. Now, my ex-husband, he was a school resource officer. That's when he got it in his head that he was going to leave me for a woman that he met in the school, one of the teachers or whatever. Anyway, that's a long story for another day. That is not the purpose of them being in a school. So they're in the school to, break up fights, investigate crimes, potential child abuse, gang, you name it. That's what they're there for. But this school is massive. It sits on 45 acres in Parkland, Florida. Now, he is on trial for child neglect, 7 counts of child neglect, 3 counts of, what was it? Reckless and, no, what was it? 3 counts of, I'm trying to think what they called it. Hold on. Sorry. Oh, I don't know what they called it. Anyway, for the people that were injured, and 1 count of perjury. Now, the counts that he is facing are for the deaths that occurred in Building 1200 on the campus of Marjory Stoneman Douglas on February 14th of 2018, when Nicholas Cruz gets out of his Uber, walks into the school with an assault rifle, and begins shooting on the first floor, goes to the second floor. No one is shot on the second floor, thank God, and then goes to the third floor. The theory put forth by the prosecution is that Scot Peterson should have intervened, thus preventing the deaths on the third floor. So the 7 people that passed away on the third floor, he's charged with child neglect. And the 3 people that were injured. We got to see 2 of those people take the stand yesterday. So the first person on the stand was Brian Stobley. He is a campus monitor. Now, one SRO on this massive campus is not enough. So they have security specialists, they have campus monitors, they call them all kinds of things, but they're pretty much all working together to achieve the same goal. So this campus monitor, an older guy, he was in the administrative building, same as the SRO when all of this started. He heard the fire alarm, he responded. Now, he talked a lot about positioning. He positioned himself near the 700 building, near where Scot Peterson was. But he said, my focus was to get those kids to a safe place. Now, this is not a witness that really stood out in my mind as making, giving me evidence that swayed me one way or the other. He said he heard gunshots coming from inside the 1200 building. But when he pointed out on the monitor, they have a map, and the jurors can see the monitor. The witness has the monitor, prosecution has a monitor, the judge has a monitor, all the jurors have a monitor, and there's this program where they can pull up this diagram of the school and they can actually mark, like, here's where I was, right here, or here's where I was, or and then they can erase it for the next witness and he can come along. And it periodically the judge will save the screenshot for future evidence to become part of the trial transcript. So he drew where he was, and that was not made clear to me because this is not always shown by the camera. Sometimes they're marking on the screen and the camera's not catching it. I don't know why. Sometimes it's caught, sometimes I think it depends on whether the judge has the main television on. If he doesn't, then the cameraman can't focus on it because the media does not have access to the monitor the way everyone else does, the parties. They can only show what's on that big TV screen in front of them. So a lot of these witnesses were pointing things out, and I just couldn't grasp where they were. But it seemed to me like this witness was closer in proximity to the school than the position that Scot Peterson, the SRO, took between the 7 and 800 building. So he said he could hear shots coming from inside the 1200 building, but he did not communicate that to Scot Peterson. Like, I think those shots are coming from inside the 1200 building. He didn't say that because his focus was on getting kids out of harm's way. He was funneling him into, I think this guy said he was putting them in there was one guy that said he was putting him in an auditorium. Okay, this is the guy. He was putting him into the auditorium and getting him into a safe place. So on cross-examination, he said that Scot Peterson was very professional. He never hesitated to jump in and, wherever he was needed. He never had any acts that he thought were cowardice or that he would cower. That's just not how he would describe Scot Peterson. And he did admit that in the area where there was a significant echo, which, that's that gunfire reverberating off the buildings, meaning you can't tell where it's from because it's bouncing off of buildings, And he admitted that there could have been multiple shooters from different areas. They didn't know. They didn't know. And he did say that he believed Scot Peterson was doing everything he could. Okay. Then we had Kyle Laman, Laman, 20 years old. He was on the third floor when this occurred. He was in fourth period study hall. Couldn't remember the room number. He was shot in the foot. So the first thing he's asked to do is to come down from the witness stand and show his foot. Here's a picture of it. It's not terrible. It's not, I mean, it is terrible. It's terrible, but it's not gruesome to look at, is what I meant to say. I mean, the poor kid has had 5, 6 surgeries. He couldn't remember how many surgeries he's had. So he was in study hall, and he said in study hall they're allowed to wear headphones. And he had headphones on, but he heard the fire alarm go off. He heard the fire alarm. And he said, it was very loud. The fire alarm is very loud. People are all talking. When a fire alarm goes off, everybody's like, is it the first thing I do when a fire alarm goes off is, do I need to evacuate? Is this the real thing? At work, I'm in the middle of something. But they're like, great, we get out of class. So they're all jumping up and they're heading out, just orderly, they're not running over each other because they don't hear the gunshots on the first floor. The third floor is not hearing the gunshots on the first floor. No, they're hearing the fire alarm. Then he realized that no one was moving and thought maybe there was a fire on the first floor because, you're on the third floor. He expected that people were going to start moving down that west staircase or the east staircase, some staircase, but he said they weren't doing that. And so he's thinking, oh, maybe there's just fire on the first floor. Then he said the east door opened and Nicholas Cruz started firing rounds down the hallway. He jumps into this little alcove leading to a bathroom. I don't know if it was a bathroom or it was some other room, but it was locked. So he and 2 other boys are hiding in that alcove. But he's already been shot by this time. He's shot in the foot, but he makes it to the alcove. And somehow, and it was never clear to me how he did this, but he escapes off the third floor, runs, and he runs into the officer that was spraying down the baseball field and had moved towards the parking lot. So I think it was the parking lot he ran towards. So he runs towards the parking lot. He runs into this officer, and he said that officer assisted him by taking him out towards the football field. But he said he was very clear with that officer that, this is occurring in the 1200 building. He doesn't know if that was related to anybody else. He's injured. He's not focusing on anything but his injury. And they actually they showed a picture of him, and I'll put that picture here. And this is like a still photo. This is them responding to the fire alarm. Right before Nicholas Cruz opens the east door. So then they showed this witness the video of Nicholas opening that east door and starting to fire, him getting shot, and the ensuing aftermath. So they show that to the jury and to this witness, and you can tell like he is shaken by this, very shaken. Like he just kept going, just it was hard to watch his reaction. It really was. And then afterwards, he says to the jury, this is the first time I've seen that entire video. So can I, because there was a question posed to him and he couldn't even respond. He says, I'm sorry. That's the first time I've seen this video. And I'm like, he couldn't even talk. He needed a minute to gather himself before he could answer the question. And he remembers going to the baseball locker room where the officer that he ran into rendered aid for him, and does not recall seeing Scot Peterson. So the next person on the stand was Eduardo Suarez, the head of maintenance. I don't know if he was the head of, like the head custodian. I don't know if he was at the time or if he was just a custodian at the time, but now he's the head custodian. So he responded when he heard the fire alarm, and he was routing kids into the home economics building when he learned, when he heard the gunfire. He's routing kids into the home ec building. And he also talks about Scot Peterson. He said, I've seen him jump into the middle of fights. I've never seen him act with any cowardice. He was always responsive when called. He never backed down from responding. So, do you see the picture we're painting here? Yeah. Then we have Anthony Voorhees. He was a student on the third floor. He was in that same classroom. It was a study hall. He remembers he too was wearing headphones. He was, as he made, he heard the fire alarm, did not hear shots. He is making his way, and this is a very soft-spoken Hispanic kid. I think he said he was from Venezuela. He goes, I know gunshots when I hear them. Because in Venezuela, you hear them all the time. So he was actually attending Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School specifically to play soccer. He was a soccer star and had plans of moving to Brazil after graduation to become a professional soccer player, which those dreams were shattered when that east door opened and Nicholas Cruz came through and shot him 5 times. Once in one leg, twice in the other leg, and 2 more times in his abdomen, one that went out the back of his body. And so then they had him wear this tracksuit, zip up, tracksuit, zips up the front, and the track pants that he wore had these snaps where you could unsnap the pants. So he gets up out of the witness stand and he comes down and he unsnaps the pants and he shows nice legs. Actually, let me tell you, this kid had some muscular legs for this skinny, scrawny kid, soft-spoken kid when you saw on the witness stand. And he gets up and he shows these legs. I'm like, ooh, but very scarred, very scarred. And his abdomen, oh my God, it looked awful. And I'm not going to put the pictures here. I mean, this poor kid during his recovery, at one point, had to have a colostomy. He doesn't have one now, but can you imagine being a teenager with a colostomy? Oh my God. How horrendous. How horrendous. And he did say he had 13 or 14 surgeries. He lost count. Poor kid. He's not a kid anymore. He's in his 20s. Or he's 19 or 20. I think he said he was 15 years old at the time, so he's probably 20. So he said initially he was yelling for help. There were 2 other bodies near him. He was talking to them and they were not responding, so he presumed they were deceased. And he didn't know their names. He described what they were wearing, which didn't trigger anything with me. I'm not sure who he was describing. But at one point he said, we were the only ones left in the hallway. And he said, I kept hollering for help and no one was coming. So he says, I called my dad to say goodbye. He said, I called my mom. There was no answer. He called someone else. There was no answer. Then he calls his dad. Why'd you call your dad? To say goodbye. He had resigned himself to dying. He says, I just accepted that this is where I was going to die, but no one was coming. Wow. So he says he only heard 4 shots. He didn't hear any of what was going on the first floor. He heard the shots when Nicholas came through the door. and shot down the hallway. Then this next witness, this was a very interesting. This was a police officer. You have these different police officers have these different personalities. This was the John Wayne police officer. I'm going to rescue, I'm the SWAT commander and I'm going to rescue everybody no matter what. And that's the SWAT mentality. He was trained SWAT, which is very different than the training a school resource officer gets. SWAT, different training. They're both sworn police officers, but the SWAT, different mentality than a school resource officer. So Nicholas Mazzi, he's with the Coral Springs Police Department. He was in a meeting at the Coral Springs Police Department when he is the SWAT commander, by the way. I wasn't being facetious. He is the SWAT commander. He was notified by dispatch that the phones were blowing up about an active shooter at Marjorie's Dome in Douglas High School. And he said that was a quote from the dispatcher. The phones were blowing up. So those 911 calls were going to Coral Springs Police Department. That's my takeaway from that. So he immediately gets in his car and he's headed towards the school. On his way to the school, he gets information that the shooter is in the 1200 building. And he gets a description of what this building, where it's located, how to get there, that kind of thing. So he knows, and he was told to respond to the west entrance of that building. He gets there at 2:31 or 2:32, 3 or 4 minutes after Nicholas Cruz has left the building. But nobody knows this because when Nicholas Cruz left, he just blended in with all the other students and no one knew he was gone. As far as anybody knew, the shooter was still in that building. So when he gets to the outside of that building, he sees Aaron Feist, the coach, who had opened the west door and gotten shot and was laying outside the building. So he checks Aaron's pulse. He realizes he's deceased. There's nothing he can do. Now, let me back up just a second. When he parks in the senior lot, he gets out of his vehicle. He puts his SWAT gear on, the vest, and he takes out a big rifle and a hand. This was asked of him by the defense attorney, and I would have loved to know the real answer. Why a rifle? Because he said he grabbed his rifle, which is always in a rack behind him. So he grabs a rifle, puts one in the chamber. Why a rifle as opposed to a handgun? Why not just take? Because I've always wondered that. Why do you need an assault rifle? What? Doesn't your handgun work? And his response was, the rifle is better. Which to me is not really an answer. Like, why is it better? That's what I would have said. Why is it better? But maybe, he had the answer he wanted, that it's better, because we're trying to show that, the school resource officer, all he had was a handgun. He didn't have all this tactical gear, including a rifle. He had a handgun. So, okay, so now we know that the rifle is better to enter that building. Okay. So once he determines that Aaron is deceased, by now he is joined by some other officers. So they proceed in through the west building. They run into Chris. What was his name? Chris. I'm sorry, I don't know all these names. Another one of the victims, the adult victims, that had also Chris Hickson. He had entered that west door before Feist and had been shot inside there, right inside the stairwell. So he left some officers to attend to him because he said at this point he could not hear any active stimuli. In other words, he's not hearing the gunman. So he assists these other guys getting Hickson out of the building So they get him out of the building, and then he proceeds in. They're starting to check the first floor. They're starting to clear the building. Now, at this point, he's thinking the shooter is still in there. Even though he's not hearing any gunfire, he's thinking there are one or more, as he said, there's a +1 rule. Anytime there's a shooter, you have to think there could be one more. If you know that there's 2 shooters, you've got to believe that there's 3. If you know that there's 4, you're going to have to believe that there's 5. That's the way the SWAT people are trained, and they have special equipment. He had a little thing he called an ASP, that he used to break out one of the windows in the door and then reached in to open it to make sure people inside were okay. So they were starting to clear the rooms, him and 6 other guys on the first floor. When the east door opens and another team comes in that door, and so he said at that point they retreated, let that team clear the first floor, and they go up to the second floor. No one was injured on the second floor, and then they proceeded to the third floor. He said it takes a lot of manpower to clear a building. Had he heard the active stimuli, he would not have been focused on the injured. Like if he had heard gunshots when he ran across Chris Hickson, he would have left Chris Hickson there and proceeded toward the sound of the gunshots. But having not hearing the gunshots, they proceeded to go from room to make sure that the shooter wasn't in there. And he said it takes quite a bit of manpower because you've got to gain entry into that room. Here's what he said. He did say if there were other police around, it would be important for them to step in and help. Then he said, your first priority is to locate the shooter. And then he said, so he was asked a lot of questions about, so what if you were by yourself, a single person entering this building? How long would it take you to clear this 73-yard building? And he said it would. He says, first of all, I don't recommend that. There's too many hard angles. You're going to end up dead. Which I thought, whoa, case is over here. He said it could never be safely done. It would take an inordinate amount of time, and no, he just says you just shouldn't do it as a single person. You should not. No. So he did say that he saw Scot Peterson after all was said and done at the tactical office drawing out a map of everything for the other. They had a tactical, when you have these emergency response to large events, you have to have a place where all the commandos meet and discuss, who's going to do what and where. And so Scott was there drawing a map for people. Here's where this is and this is and this is. So he was helping. He wasn't rushing in as a single person who's not trained in SWAT tactics, who's not got tactical gear on, who's not got a rifle. I mean, this witness, I don't know why the prosecution put him on. He did not help their case at all, I don't think. Okay, so now I think you guys know which way I'm leaning. Yeah. All right. So more testimony today. That was the last witness for yesterday. More testimony today. Yeah. Should be interesting. I think there's one more student to testify that was injured on the third floor. Yeah. Okay. So have a great weekend, guys. I had a blast last night playing Zelda. I was live playing Zelda, and we got into it because the people in the chat were helping me try to solve this shrine puzzle at the end, and we just could not figure it out. they'd say try this, and I would try this, and then I'd try that, and then we just it wasn't working. So I got to look up how to cheat and do it. But anyway, have a great weekend, guys. I hope to see you on Sunday. I will be live for Coffee and Chat at 11 Central. I hope to see you there. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye, everybody.